Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Ali, Coram, and Shreve here with a breakdown of the action in today's session where we saw stocks dip ahead of some key inflation data coming out tomorrow, Ken.
Yeah, pretty orderly decline for the market. We did see higher volume on the NASDAQ, so it looks like this will be a little mild distribution day for the tech index. But before we get into that, let's talk about three stocks that I found here. MakeMyTrip, this is an India-based travel firm, MMYT. Also want to take a look at Cava, which we have been discussing lately. Fast-growing restaurant stock that reported strong earnings earlier this week, and finally On Holding, which has earnings coming up and starting to show relative strength as well.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at those three stocks, but first let's analyze the major indexes. As you mentioned, the NASDAQ down on the day by about 0.6%. Down a little bit more was the Russell 2000 small caps, down 0.8%. The S&P 500 off by 0.2%, and the Dow down just modestly here, less than 0.1% today. So we have that 16,000 level on the NASDAQ we're watching, but what do you make of the action here today for the tech-led index?
Well, I thought it was another pretty strong day overall for growth stocks. There were a lot of good movers underneath the surface. We did have negative breadth on the Nasdaq. Maybe not a big surprise, but it was less than 2-to-1 negative. I mentioned the higher volume on the Nasdaq, so this is going to be a higher volume decline, so we'll add a distribution day to the Nasdaq's count, but still dealing with a fairly manageable, distribution day count for both indexes at this point. And market's just kind of in a holding pattern here, Ali, ahead of this personal income and spending data tomorrow. That's got the personal consumption expenditures index. That is one of the Fed's preferred inflation gauges. So could be an interesting day tomorrow.
Absolutely. Okay, let's also take a look at the S&P 500. What are you seeing on this index, Ken?
All right, let's see here. S&P 500, kind of a similar situation to the NASDAQ, actually probably holding up a little better, gapped up over the 5,000 level and is really kind of holding near highs, holding above short-term support levels. So really strong index here. And, we've seen a number of distribution days in this index, some of these, higher volume declines, which is, sort of just a sign of subtle institutional selling. But index is still acting well here. And again, just can't reiterate enough, just we're really not seeing any sell signals at all in leading growth stocks. So until that starts to happen, I think you still have to respect this uptrend.
Okay, and yeah, the Dow looks pretty strong as well. Where it is, Ken?
Yeah, Dow actually came down to its 10-day moving average. That's the green line there on the daily chart, and kind of rallied off lows and closed up near its high. So pretty mild selling pressure in the Dow and the S&P 500 today. Most of the selling was concentrated in small caps and the NASDAQ, but again, at least for the NASDAQ, a pretty orderly decline.
Yeah, and speaking of small caps, let's check out the Russell 2000 because it's at a critical juncture on the index side. We've been looking at that 2000 level on IWM right around 200. But if we look at a weekly chart, that trading range, we really want to see small caps pick up and go and join this rally. So we're not quite seeing that just yet, but it's at a critical level.
Yes, it is. It's actually, in position to break out here, not to an all-time high, but break out to a 52-week high and at least a 2-year high. Let me just go back. I'll just pull a weekly chart up here for the index. Yeah, you can see it's just kind of right on the cusp of a breakout here. So we'll see if small caps can do that. It's certainly in position for a breakout try. It wasn't a great close for the index. It was trading it was actually a nice inside day for most of the day, trading inside of yesterday's range, but kind of selling picked up the pace late in the Russell. So you got to close near lows. Not the end of the world here, but this is an index definitely on breakout watch here.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's check out the 10-year Treasury yield. It seems like come tomorrow, inflation data, that's going to be something to watch.
I suspect we're going to see some movement one way or the other in that 10-year Treasury yield. I suppose it could be a muted response, but it's such a closely watched piece of data tomorrow. Wouldn't be surprised to see the 10-year move one way or the other. What is interesting about the 10-year yield is, boy, it really, when it stormed above its 200-day moving average, it hit that low of 3.81, 3.82%. That was all the way back at the beginning of the month, and you can see 10-year yield has really raced higher and is holding on to the bulk of these gains. So I think the bond market is just sort of pricing in a higher for longer scenario that the market seems to be getting comfortable with. At one point, the market was thinking there were going to be a lot of aggressive rate cuts by the Fed, but those expectations have been dialed way back. And now there's a thought that rates could stay elevated for a while as the Fed continues its fight against inflation. So tomorrow, the personal consumption expenditure index, it is expected to dip core year over year, dip to 2.8%. So we're getting closer to that 2% threshold that the Fed wants to see. But of course, a couple of weeks ago, we had consumer prices and wholesale inflation go in the opposite direction. So we'll hope that that does not happen tomorrow.
Okay, well, we will gear up for that one way or another, as you mentioned, Ken. Okay, well, let's take a look at some individual stocks, starting with MakeMyTrip. This is MMYT in the leisure sector, a travel booking company. It's up about 3.8% so far for the week and hovering right around that round number of 60.
Yeah, this is interesting, and it's a stock that I've started to do a little bit of work on. What's interesting is that we had a couple of bad earnings reports in this industry group. We had Booking BKNG, which sold off after earnings, another online travel firm still below its 50-day, and then before that it was Expedia that had a disappointing earnings report as well, and that really sold off hard. Yet you have MMYT, again, based in India. They do basically the same thing as Expedia and Booking. They're just doing it in India. This stock has just been such a strong performer, and it's still under accumulation. It's got that accumulation distribution of rating of A, and to see this stock hold the gains like it has. Last time it broke out of a base was all the way back in this area here. And it's just kind of ridden the 10-week moving average higher. So I have this on the watch list. Preferably, I'd like to see it form a new base here, so it consolidate for at least 5 weeks. So it's about almost 2 weeks into a new consolidation. But this is a good one for the watch list just because of the strength it's showing. And of course, you've got great top line growth in recent quarters. And look at these explosive earnings increases as well. So this stock definitely passes muster from a fundamental and technical standpoint.
Let's move on to look at Cava. Investors cheering the earnings report for this restaurant stock this week, up about 11.6% for the week so far, adding a little bit to the gains today, but it's a strong week for the stock, and it's now getting close to that prior high from that IPO base run up.
Yes, it is. It was a pretty strong earnings report that we saw earlier this week. You can see that revenue growth there, up 36%. Nice acceleration from 26% growth in Q3. Got some big earnings increases here as well. You've got good growth prospects. So I think this is a compelling growth story. It's still, a lot of people still haven't heard of Cava and their Mediterranean cuisine, but the company is busy expanding and is a compelling growth story here. So, I mean, what you have here is just a first stage IPO base. It broke out a couple of times earlier. You had a little breakout over a handle area right here, and then another little breakout here. So we put this on the leaderboard watch list today. Some would argue it's still in buy range after it topped this latest handle buy point right here. We're going to wait for a little pullback in light volume and look for a better entry here. But I think this is a compelling growth story in the restaurant space, and a new issue. Still seems like it could be in the early stages of a move here.
All right, yeah, it's almost like a Mediterranean Chipotle. some might.
Exactly, exactly. And I think the most one of the another compelling thing here is the chairman of the board of investors and a big investor in Cava is a gentleman named Ron Shaich, who led Panera during its major growth phase as a publicly traded company. So Ron Shaich has got great restaurant pedigree. He's a big investor here, and again, chairman of the board of directors here. So I think there's a lot to like about Cava.
All right. And last but not least, let's take a look at ticker ONON, a shoe stock that's trying to kick it up a notch.
Yes, not on semiconductor. ONON. There we go. Yeah, so we are on reports earnings next month. I believe March 12th is the earnings date, so it's still a couple of weeks away, but definitely seeing some new signs of accumulation here on the weekly chart. These big weekly up weeks, and the stock is. If we look at the daily chart here, another stock with great fundamentals. You can see the top line growth has just been exceptional in recent quarters. This looks like a little handle buy point right here. So we'll be watching on to see if it's still in a buy zone as the earnings date approaches on March 12th. Maybe if it pulls back closer to this buy area. It could make sense for a call option trade or something along those lines. But impressed by this stock's relative strength ahead of earnings, and wouldn't be surprised to see a strong number here.
All right. Well, thank you, Ken, for breaking all of that down. And I know we have more earnings reports coming out after the close today, before the bell tomorrow. And as you mentioned, we still got ONON coming up. So
definitely.
A lot of headlines still for investors to digest. All right. Well, thanks to everyone for tuning in. That is it from us for today. And be sure you check out IBD Live tomorrow morning, where we've got the latest stock market news and analysis, investors.com/IBD Live for all the details on that. We will see you there. And then we'll also see you right back here tomorrow at the close.